Hi class, it's Bill Berry back with the last video, I promise, in the preparation week, sort of our mostly review and some new information week in our Java 2 class. We've talked about a lot of stuff that should have been reviewed, multidimensional arrays, the basics of Java documentation, right? But we've also added some things that may be new. You may not have used enumerated types, right? You may not have run EXLENT before, certainly, probably most of you haven't. And another topic that we want to touch on just briefly is I want to make sure you know the tools that you have in terms of debugging. In this course, if you don't know how to use the debugger, you don't know how to find your own errors, the coding tasks will seem really heavy. Another way to say it, maybe a little dramatic, is that coding will kill you, right? This is the difference between somebody who can spend a few hours on a project and somebody who spends 20, 30 hours on a project. A lot of that is about debugging, where you don't know how to find your own errors. Please, please tell me that you come into the class with some debugging skills. Please tell me that your teachers taught you about how to use the debugger in whatever environment you were using. As long as you know how to use a debugger, you can figure out how to use this debugger. But this is a really critical thing. So please know how to use the tools and practice using the tools of debugging, because you're going to need it and you want to save yourself some time. And yeah, anyway, enough preaching. Let's go on and actually look at the topic. So what is debugging about? Let's look at the tools, let's do a quick example, etc. So debugging is not the same as testing, right? Testing is looking for errors, testing that things work in the positive when they should, but also looking for errors, challenging your code to try to see if it does things that are bad. Debugging, though, is once you know that there's a problem, where is it? How do you find it? How do you figure out where in your code it's happening? Now, to do this, when we first start, when you took Python or whatever, when you first start programming, typically we do poor man's debugging by using print statements. But print statements are a pain. They take you time to write, and then they cause their own problems sometimes. But certainly at the end, you got to take them out, right? You don't want these print statements just printing stuff randomly. So print statements are poor man's debugging. You don't want to do that when you start getting into the professional world. There's better ways, right? There's ways to use the debugger to your advantage. Print statements are not the thing. They look like complete rookie kinds of moves. Sometimes you still need them, but in general, debuggers are your friend, right? There are better debugging tools. A professional spends a lot of time in the debugger, and they know how to really move through them. Right? In our case, we're going to learn the basic tools of moving around, but there's usually in a fancier integrated development environment way fancier debugging tools, and so you're going to get intimately acquainted, and you should be, with those tools. So I already said this. Next bullet point. So what do debuggers give us, right? What do they bring? Well, the first thing is they let us set breakpoints. A breakpoint says when you get to this point in code, stop. So when you run the code, it doesn't run all the way through, but yet it stops right before execution of the line in question. So setting a breakpoint is often a very good start, where you say, look, I just want to check the state of the universe right here. What else? It lets you step through your code. Right? So you can literally go line by line. You can follow function calls if they're made. You can walk through line by line, and at each line you can see number one, where you are, right? Did you go into the if statement? Are you in the if part? Are you in the else part? Where did you go? But you can also check the value of variables. You can see any global variables, and you can see local variables. So you can check the state to see if everything was as you expected, and very often when you get around the area where you believe the problem is, that's enough information, right? So it's easy to learn. The tools are not that hard to do, right? Especially in BlueJ, there's not that many features, right? So easier to learn is that. A little bit harder is to figure out where, right? There's a little bit of, it'll take a little bit of time to learn the art of where we debug. Do we start at a high level? Do we start in the low level details? So getting that is a skill that takes some time, where sort of get a sense of where to do that. So let's take our bank example and let's do some debugging on it just to see if we can sort of figure out this problem. I'm going to start BlueJ, and we're going to run this thing, and we're going to see what happens when I say run main, right? Because I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, maybe I'm expecting it to work. Let's see if it does. Okay, I call main, I say okay, and boom. I get an index out of bounds and I get a call stack. Okay, so out of bounds, it's checking here. Okay, main had called get accounts below amount. If I click there, it'll take me to that line. So on that line, somehow, I'm getting an index out of bounds exception. Index 0 out of bounds for length 0. It sounds like my array doesn't have anything in it. Okay, so I'm going to start here. So at this case, maybe I'm thinking, I guess that's as good a place to start as any, and this is the line where it's happening, right? So I could actually put a breakpoint here, and the way that you do that is make sure you've compiled your code, because you can't set a breakpoint if you haven't, and then click in the margin, right? Even if you don't have line showing, which you probably want to turn on, but you can click in the margin, or you can click on the line and press Control B, B for breakpoint. That toggles the breakpoint. That will stop right before it gets to this line. So now let's go take a look. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this, Control K, because I don't want to see that. I don't want to start, sort of fresh. And I'm going to go run main again. All right, now this is hard to do when I've got this sort of bad setup here. I've got such a low resolution on this monitor, but what you want to do is you want to have your debugger over here and your code over here, ideally, right? So it has stopped right before that, and you can see right here, if we look, right, here we have our bank account list called accounts, and here we have interest rate. That looks fine. Here we have our value, and here we have our accounts, and here's an index. Okay, so let's go look. What is it trying to do here? What index is our problem? Well, I'm doing a get on index account, and index account is, I'm looking for the 0, the first item in the list, right? Because this is a for loop that's going through them all. So why would that be blank? Why would that array not exist? So that's an interesting one. Oh, wait. While I'm here, did you see this thing? Why am I hard coding the length of the array? That's kind of dumb, right? That's an obvious mistake while I'm in the neighborhood. So I'm going to terminate this and I'm going to go fix that, right? Because what I should really be using is, I'm going to be using accounts dot size, right? I need to use that as my check for the top end. Maybe that's all it takes. I don't think so, but let me just fix that. I'll recompile everything. I'll terminate the debugging session, right? And then I'll start again. You can also do this to reset the whole, the whole running Java, runtime thing. So now I'm going to do this. I'm going to run it again and see if that solves the problem. Oh, wait. That's much better, right? That's much better. But I have 0 accounts under $4,000. Is that appropriate? Well, I'm going to go back there to where I was. Get accounts below. Where is that guy? Oh, wait, that's bank accounts. So let's look at bank. Get accounts below. So now I'm just going to put a breakpoint maybe right here, right? Or maybe on the return, right? I'm going to actually see. Maybe I'm not returning the right thing, right? So let's make sure. So in this case, I'm going to go again and run this. And again, I'm going to bring my code up here, and I'm ready to return. And I'm going to see what I'm about to return. Accounts below to array. Okay, so let me look. Okay, so I'm going to return accounts below. Let's see what's in it. Okay, oh, wait a minute. There's nothing in it. Interesting. Well, why do I have nothing in accounts below? Well, what about my raw data? What about this? Well, let me look. Oh, wait a minute. Bank account. Wait, there's no bank accounts. What's going on there? I have 0 length. I have no bank accounts in my accounts. Okay, so that's a big problem that I need to figure out. So I'm going to terminate this and see if I can figure that out. Okay, so take a quick look at this and see if you see the problem, right? Do you see anything there? So I don't see anything else in here that looks like a problem, because the accounts should already be here, right? I have a global for accounts. So why is that wrong? So I know what I'll do. I'm going to come back to where I was. I want to see whether I messed it up or whether it came in wrong. So if you actually put a breakpoint here and ran it, you'd see that the accounts are still bad at that point, right? There's nothing in there even at this point, and we haven't touched anything about accounts. So it's not us. So now the problem is, why when I get here is it not, do we not have any accounts? Well, maybe I'm not reading them right. Right, because I'm calling read accounts from file. So let's see what's going on down there. Read accounts from, well, let me just start here then and say, okay, I'm going to do read accounts from file. I want to kind of check and see after that line is run what's going on. Right, so sometimes if it's the last line here, it's actually hard to debug. So if it is, you can always put something stupid here, right, like int x equals 1. Because I need a line to put a breakpoint on, right? So I'm going to look and see, did I even read my accounts? Is that where the problem is, or what? Okay, so now again, I'll compile everything. I'll run main. Okay, now let's bring up the code, and now let's see what we got. Here is our list of bank accounts. Oop, there's 0. There's nothing here. Okay, so after I've believed that I've read the accounts, there are no accounts in the global accounts. Yipes. Okay, so now where do I go? Well, obviously I'm going to terminate this. I've got to go look somewhere else. So let's go look at read accounts. Okay, so let's come in here and let's find our read accounts. And here's, let me just put a breakpoint here, and I'm going to go again run. Okay, so in here I have my accounts that I have created. Wait a minute. There's instance variables. Wait a minute. This is instance variables. Okay, that's great. Do I have local variables? Let me step to the next line. Anybody see the problem? Anybody see the problem? I have instance variables for the class, and here's my list of local variables. Wait a minute. I have a local variable called accounts, and I have a global variable called accounts. Is that what I wanted to do? Oh gosh, no, that's not. I didn't want to do that because now I'm using the local. The local variable is masking. It's making it impossible for Java to see the instance variable from the class. So I have now masked that. Why? Because I redeclared it. Oops. I didn't mean to redeclare it, I just wanted to use that one, right? I just wanted to use the old one. But notice I can step through line by line. Notice I also, while I'm here, I can also step into which, if there was a function call somewhere, it would take me into the next level rather than staying in this particular method. It would follow me into the other method. That's step into. Right? And continue means just run till the next breakpoint or till finish. Does everyone see that that's our problem? That this now I need to change. I'm going to terminate the debugging session, right? I'm going to go make sure that I did that correctly, just use accounts. I'm going to compile, I'm going to run main. Ooh, I have many, many accounts that are under $4,000. There you go, 206 of them. Scroll through them all. That looks great. Now, I think there's actually more problems in here. I think we'd also want to check and make sure we're getting all of our accounts. If we looked at our file that we're reading, I think we'll find out we have a problem in here, and that means we have a loop problem. So there's more debugging to do here, but at least you've seen some of the options that you can do here, how you can start the debugger and how you can walk in. Let me demonstrate to you the difference between step and step into, just so you have an idea. Let's do this. Let's put a breakpoint right here. Okay. If I run the debugger from this point, I want to show you the difference. If I run the debugger here, the difference between step is if I said step, I'm going to end up here. Right? Step means stay at the same level, stay in this method. But if I said step into, I would be following it into this method call, and I would go into the read accounts from file method. So that's the difference, step into versus step. In fancier debuggers, you also have a thing called step out, which means, oops, I got in too deep. I didn't want to be at this level. I want to kind of go back to where I was, and that would be step out. We don't have that. Fancier debuggers can also set things like stop when the value of this variable becomes this value. Right? We don't have that here, but at least we have the critical things. Step into, continue, and terminate. That's the basic stuff that you need. Right? So at this point, I just wanted to show you that that was the case. So that kind of gets us into some of the debugging. The other thing to note is, let's go ahead and step. Right? The other thing I want to point out to you is BlueJ will do a pretty good job at helping you into objects. So if I double click accounts, notice it has element data, size, etc. And now if I double click this, it takes us into the array, right? And in the array, I can now see how many there are, and I can also double click each one of them and go into a bank account and see all of the details there. Right? So you can really navigate through these objects very nicely, right? Very nicely. Okay? So that shows you a lot about what's going on here. And hopefully that makes sense. And the debugger is your friend. It's something that you need to get used to using and be comfortable using, right? So please ask if you have more questions about the debugger and learn to use the tool. It will save you a lot of headaches and it'll save you a lot of time. And you will put it to good use, especially with null references, right? You'll find null references and null pointers, exceptions all over the place. This is a good way to help figure it out. Start at the place where you think it's happening or back up a little bit, check the state of the world, pay attention to globals, pay attention to locals, and dive into the objects and make sure they have the state that you think they do. So hopefully this is a helpful start on debugging. I appreciate you watching these videos, and this is the last video in our series for our sort of catching up for the first week and getting on level ground. We'll be off to more interesting stuff soon in terms of technology, in terms of data structures. A lot of good stuff coming up, so pay attention to those videos, and I hope to see you in the next one or the next series. Thanks for watching.